Hey, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm your host, Brian Purdell, and this is Speedify Live, the live stream about live streaming. It's brought to you by Speedify, and this is the show where we practice what we preach and we take Speedify live. So we love the engagement from our community, and we want to highlight some of the thought-provoking questions we see from our users, all anonymously, of course. So go ahead and give us a follow and tell us who you're watching so we can get them on the show. And this is a live show, so go ahead and ask any questions you have in the comment section. If you're on YouTube or Twitch or wherever you're at watching us, go ahead and ask your questions, and we will get to as many as we can. So today is our office hours. So yeah, go ahead, get those questions in. Let's get this rolling. So with me today is Kevin Cunningham.
Hello.
He is lead developer on Speedify. Oh, somebody knows someone named Kevin who looks similar. All right. All right. Hamza says, hi, how are you? How are you, Hamza? We are doing pretty well. Hi, Rita. Okay. So why don't we jump in and talk about what Speedify is? So Kevin, do you want to explain what Speedify is?
Yeah. So Speedify is software that runs on bunch of different devices, your phones, your computers, and it allows you to make use of multiple internet connections. So to do that, it is a VPN. So we're allowing you to use multiple internet connections, and you're sending your traffic back through our servers to get to the internet. And what this allows you to do is either combine your connections for more speed. So if you're two slow connections and want to combine them and get more speed out of it to be able to do what you want to do online, or for reliability purposes, you have a connection that drops out. Starlink is a good example there. Or if you're moving around and dropping in and out of range of certain connections, you can fail over and switch over to the other connections and have them help you out. And it keeps everything seamless. So even as your connections come and go, it allows you to keep doing whatever you're doing online without getting interrupted.
All right. Let's see. So Hamza is an application user from Morocco. All right.
Welcome.
How is the weather in Morocco? Okay. Let's see. So a common question we get, it's probably worth jumping into, is what settings should people use?
Yeah, so we try to pick what settings by default we think make most sense for most users. So a lot of users can probably just leave the default settings. And we have some clever things in there. There's connection priorities that you can control. And with our automatic, which is the default, we try and detect connections that we think are cellular or might be data capped, or you might want to use less. And we set those to secondary by default, which means Speedify is going to try to use them less. So we have some neat things in there. And we also have different modes, and we try and pick what we think is going to work the best for most users. But depending on what you're doing, you may want to adjust some of those settings. Particularly people that are doing gaming or stock trading or real time things. Some of them might want to switch to our redundant mode, which sends traffic on both connections and gives you kind of an ultra reliable mode. There's certain people that like that, and for certain people running into certain types of connections that you run into issues, you might want to switch the transport mode around. You're trying UDP on certain internet connections or with certain applications that you're using that might work better. So yeah, most people can usually use the default settings, but we have KB articles that describe lots of different settings and when you might want to change things around if you're running into issues.
All right. So let's go. All right, cool. Okay, so yeah, we talked a little bit about that. So before we jump into the next thing, I know last year we made a lot of improvements around using Speedify for live streaming. Do you want to talk a bit about some of the things we do to help specifically live streaming with Speedify?
Yeah. So yeah, by default, one of our default things is we have a streaming enhancement mode that's turned on. And so what that does is it tries to detect anytime that you're doing any sort of real-time traffic. So that could be video calls, audio calls, or live streaming where you're sending video out. So we try and identify that traffic and prioritize it over other traffic. So you don't have your your updates coming in the background while you're in the middle of streaming and messing things up. We try and prioritize your streaming traffic. We also do some extra special um, kind of quality of service things to look at that traffic and really make sure that it gets through. So, if we're seeing extra loss or latency on your connections when you're streaming, we'll be a little more aggressive about using your other connections and, sending packets redundantly when we can to really make sure that stream is reliable. So those are some of the things kind of on the performance side that we did. But then, yeah, we also on the UI, we're displaying when you have those streams going on and some statistics about them, so you can kind of see what's going on. And when we help to save your streams, times that we've used bonding or switched to redundant mode, things like that, we'll let the users know about that as well.
All right. So Sean is combining 100 meg mobile connection and 37 meg cable, and he's getting about 45. So what might he want to try?
So by default, I'm guessing that the cable is set to primary, and then does he say which priorities? So yeah, by default, if the cable is set to primary and the 5G is set to secondary, which is probably going to be the default, it's probably going to use mostly the cable and maybe just bring in a little bit of the 5G unless it really needs it, particularly if the cable's fast enough. It might not be pulling in the 5G. So you can try and set the 5G to primary and see if it uses both that way and gives you more of the speed boost that you want. But in general, with the cellular connections, we try to limit how much we use of them unless the primary connections really slowing down or starting to fail or something like that, and then we'll kick into the secondary connections. But if you don't care as much about the usage on the 5G, you can try setting that to primary, and that should combine them a bit better.
Yeah, I think that 37 meg cable, that's going to be right near the overflow threshold we had, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
if it looks like you have a primary connection that's at least 35 megabits, it won't bring in other connection types that are set to a lot lower priority. Um, and so it sounds like you're right on that border. So yeah, I think setting them both to primary should help. I'd make sure that you're connected to a server that's close to you, and might be worth trying different transport modes. But I think the defaults that we have should be good. But yeah, I think bumping that priority, I think should probably help you out. All right, let's see. William has a question. Here we are. Sets his cell and cable both to primary. His latency ping is slower of the two. But I leave cell at secondary. Okay. So yeah, if they're primary, sometimes we'll put packets over.
Yeah. So usually for low amounts of traffic, if you're relatively idle, things like gaming or things like that, we should try and prefer the lower latency connection. But yeah, if you have both the primary, it is going to be, especially if you're sending more traffic, it's going to be balancing packets between them. So yes, sometimes you're going to get some of the latency of that second connection. I guess that's one of the downsides of bonding things is it can hurt the latency sometimes if you have a higher latency connection. So yeah, the redundant mode that we have, we'll try to minimize. If you're really only doing low latency or low bandwidth stuff, and you're not concerned about data usage, you can try the redundant mode, particularly for gaming or things like that, and it'll send the packets on both and deliver whatever gets through first. So that should minimize the latency across your connections and give you the best latency that it can at any given time.
All right. Yeah, Art has a question about adding crypto payment. It's the only way people in Iran can buy. So I'll address those on their own. So crypto payment, we've looked at it in the past. It's such a variable thing. It's a little tough to kind of price. I know there are partners that we could use to kind of make that a little easier for us. Um, I was a little discouraged by some of the reports that came out from some companies where it ended up that most of the payments they were getting through crypto were people that were looking to use their stuff fraudulently. Um, that discouraged me a bit. So we were going down that path, and then that those sorts of reports started to come out, and I was like, eh. So we might still add crypto payment, especially if things stabilize. It seems like it might be all on the way out. But yeah, it's certainly something we're open to and look at from time to time. Um, the next thing, it's the only way people in Iran can buy. So, I mean, Connectify, our company is a U.S. company. Iran is an embargoed country, so we can't sell, and we can't sell to people in Iran, and we don't want we don't want their money. So we've been offering free data and doing what we can, as much as we can to help people with the 20 gig initial couple months, and then now 5 gigs. You get additional data if you're coming from Iran, but we really can't we can't sell to you. So we're doing what we can to help you. I know the situation with the internet is tough there and not really getting better. So we're doing what we can to help, but we really can't sell to you. All right, Hamza. Looks like Hamza has an issue with an outage. Yeah, so I know we show the numbers here every week of how many users we're getting from Iran specifically, and just globally, we're picking up a lot of users every week, and it's something to the tune of, like, I think 500,000 new devices every week that we haven't seen before, and so it's been pushing our systems to the limits for the past few months, and so we keep scaling up and we keep trying to improve things, but we've been dealing with an issue really since last weekend, or I mean since this weekend. So the past few days, we're dealing with an issue where sometimes our authentication system just can't deal with the load. So we put in a mitigation yesterday to help with that, and then last night we still had a job that was running that brought things down. So we are working hard. I mean, it's all we've been focused on since really last week. This particular issue, Um, and so we're going to keep working on that to keep our authentication system up. But it's just kind of a really high load, and we've been doing what we can to try to keep things scaling up and comfortable. And so the good news is most of the day it can, but we just hit these spikes where things kind of snowball. So if you have an issue with not being able to sign in, or it tells you your account doesn't exist or something, feel free to shoot us an email. I will let you know probably when things are back, but for the most part, things are pretty stable and we're working on it. All right. Does it have to be something running in the background for an app to continue running? So yeah, I mean, I guess focusing on the different mobile platforms are probably the most interesting to talk about. I mean, on iOS, we're a network extension, so the VPN process kind of runs in the background in a framework that iOS provides for us, and so that needs to keep running. And on Android, it's a little similar, where I think it's actually a foreground service, so we can stay alive on Android. But yeah, I mean, everything we do with the VPN and with channel bonding is through the VPN APIs that the platforms provide. Um, so yeah, it needs to stay running.
But yeah, on either of those platforms, you should be able to swipe away or kill the user interface, and yeah, the VPN portion will keep running in the background, even if the user interface isn't running.
All right, should we talk about what's new in Speedify?
I don't know what that means.
IPFS, protocol file system stuff, crypto file sharing, maybe.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Let's pass. I'll pass. All right, let's talk about what's new in Speedify. Let's go. All right, what's coming up in Speedify? What are we working on?
Yeah, so we're getting ready to launch Speedify 13, next new major version of Speedify. So we've been working pretty hard for the past few weeks to get this ready. It's looking like we're doing some of the final testing and wrapping things up now this week. So it's looking like sometime next week it will be when the new version's going to be available. Lots of kind of upgrades and fixes, kind of behind the scenes, performance and stability and lots of things like that. But also adding a lot of Mac user experience things. So things that have been plaguing Mac users, things that people have been complaining about. We've been fixing things there, as well as adding native support for M1 Macs and M2 Macs. So you got people that complained about needing Rosetta installed for the Mac version of Speedify. That with the new version, you'll be able to run it without Rosetta. So yeah, lots of stability and kind of behind the scenes improvements coming. Not many new kind of user-facing features that you'll see in the UI or anything, but just hopefully things will work a lot better for users that are seeing issues.
All right, so Rita is asking if we can add L2TP to Speedify. So I can take that one. So
Sure.
Speedify itself, it uses our own VPN protocol, and so yeah, it doesn't build on top of like IPsec or L2TP or any of the OpenVPN, kind of any of the main VPN protocols. And we do that so that we can have really our own. We could wrap every application packet in information that we care about, and so that means that we can do things like send one stream of data over multiple connections and put them back in the right order on the other side, and know basically immediately as soon as one of those connections starts to get congested, whether it starts to drop packets or latency starts to build up, we can get those indicators right away and know like, okay, this connection is handling as much traffic as it can. Let's ease up on that, like all that sort of stuff. So Speedify protocol is really its own thing. So it's not really easy for us to just say, okay, let's do it with IPsec. We could make our servers support IPsec or L2TP or something, just by running those server processes on there, and then not be able to get the channel bonding and that other stuff. But there's already companies that do that, I feel like. And my main complaint with those is we can do stuff with Speedify to make it harder to block us and to make us work in more places, where with like L2TP and IPsec and even OpenVPN, it's really trivial for people to see and just say, no, I'm not going to allow L2TP on this network, and just ban it, just by really basic port inspection. And so with Speedify, we can do a lot of things like, really run things over UDP or TCP, or even over multiple TCP sockets, or if none of that stuff works, we can send it over HTTPS, and that stuff. It's not a common thing, and especially the kind of standard VPN protocols, that doesn't really work. So I don't have a ton of interest in supporting other protocols, but we're always open to it. But I feel like there's companies that do that.
Yeah, I think if we're going to do anything, it'd be something maybe WireGuard based or something like that.
Could be,
but yeah,
could be.
I don't see us having a lot of interest in doing that.
Yeah, so I'm kind of interested in why you want L2TP. I think most of the time I hear about people that want that, it's because they have a Fire Stick or something, and they want to get it on a VPN, and it only supports a couple VPN protocols. And so if that's the sort of thing that you're, if that's why you want L2TP, let me know. Otherwise, I'm curious why you want it. We provide link bypass in the app. I'm not quite sure what you mean, but I've heard people ask if they can just kind of add their own things to the app bypass. So I'm wondering if that's, I guess some more information.
They might mean for a specific URL being able to bypass it. Maybe that's what they mean by link. So yeah, I mean we're working on expanding how much we offer in that bypass section in the near future. Whether people will be able to add custom entries, that's still kind of up in the air of whether we support that. If you are on a desktop platform with the CLI, so Windows or Linux or Mac, where you can get the CLI, you can add custom entries currently for things that'll bypass from the CLI, but it's not in our main user interface. But yeah, we're looking at kind of expanding what things you can bypass and making that much more user-friendly in the near future.
Yeah, and so on Android, you can go, there's a list of all the apps on Android, but Windows doesn't have that. It might, but Mac and iOS, we don't really get that information. So yeah, Windows, it's possible, and Android has it now. All right. So yeah, you'd be surprised. I feel like I'm the most consistent, longest complaining about Mac features, probably.
Alex doesn't really use the Mac that much.
Yeah,
he's on Windows mostly.
Yeah, the machine we're streaming from now is Mac. So if he pops out and shows screenshots of things or whatever, or shows Windows, that's on a Mac. But I might be the biggest Mac complainer in the team. All right. Pixelvester has been using Speedify for about 5 months, and then last month had some issues with having a tough time connecting to servers. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the situation in Iran is still difficult. I know they're still kind of doing what they can over there to stop people from being able to use VPNs, and so we sometimes have to do things to shuffle assets around, shuffle things around, to try to keep things working. It's also just there's a lot of people there trying to connect, and so I think a lot of times the default thing of like connect me to the fastest server, all of the servers that we think might be fastest for you might be at capacity, so you may need to pop out and try to connect to another city. So here's our stats. So looks like 611,000 users last week, about 359 terabytes, and about 84,000 stream urgency saves as our data. So, pretty consistent. I think that's right around where we were last week as well, but still just a lot of devices, a lot of users, and a lot of data pumping. So I think that's about a little over 700 terabytes through our servers, because each byte has to kind of come in the server and go out the server, and so it's a lot of data. In Iran, we're continuing to give people 5 gigs free. So if you are there and not getting that 5 gigs, you can reach out to support and we'll hook you up. We're continuing to do what we can, but it's a lot of users and it's a lot of data. So, all right. Yeah, Sean loves the HTTPS feature. Seems that the EE mobile network does not allow you to use UDP, TCP, but when I use HTTPS, it works great. That's awesome.
That's good. Yeah.
That's exactly how my library network is. I'm at the library, hanging out, and yeah, they'll let you use web browsing, but basically nothing else, which means that I wouldn't be able to bond it with my cell. And given that where my library is, my cell is slow and their Wi-Fi is slow, I really want to bond it. So yeah, actually with that HTTPS feature, that sort of from the get-go, that worked way faster and way better than I thought it would. I thought it'd be kind of slow and still, kind of a best effort thing. And then I think we set it up and we disabled the logging on it and ran a speed test. It was like 150 megabits or something. Like, oh, this is really fast. It's faster than I thought. So yeah, and it's kind of neat the way that stuff works. So everything no matter what no matter what protocol you pick there, all that traffic sort of gets encrypted. All your application traffic gets encrypted the same way. And so with HTTPS, there's another layer of TLS on top of that. But yeah, the underlying packets are kind of all the same that flow over those. So yeah, glad to hear it works. I know that's there's a bunch of networks that basically only want you to do web stuff, and so I'm glad that's working. All right. William R. loves the stats, graphs, info, and tools that Speedify has. Yes, other VPNs don't have that. Absolutely right. And so you mentioned Pingify there, and that's kind of a fun one. People may not know that exists, but it's still in the app stores if you want to grab it. A lot of stuff. I mean, you get to trying to make a VPN for people that are in tough network situations, and you kind of just want to see more and more information. And so we tried to build as much into the UI that we thought would be helpful. So showing ping, showing loss, all that stuff can really matter if you're out in the field and you're trying to do something. It can be really helpful just to look and say, oh, this is the connection that's bad. So having that all in the UI really helps. And for especially doing things like driving around or walking around and testing networks over geographic stuff, Pingify is really cool. I mean, you can map and basically watch your latency and your loss on different network types and kind of just drive around the city and look at all the data. It's a pretty cool tool. And so that's one that when we wanted that initially, I didn't want to build it. And we looked around and we bought everything and we tried everything and sort of came to the conclusion that nothing seemed good for just moving around and testing latency and loss over different networks. You could sort of get tools that would work over one network, but I wanted to test over 3. So we ended up building Pingify and putting that out for Android and iOS. And so it's kind of a neat tool. If you're doing network testing stuff and care about those stats, that's a neat one. All right. Fatima says, thank you for supporting Iranian people. Yeah, I really hope that I hope the situation in Iran gets a lot better for all of you folks. Really hoping everybody, gets to a happy conclusion there and everybody can get back on posting pictures of their cats on Facebook and everything else that I think would rather be doing than what's going on. So I hope everybody gets a happy ending there. All right. Should we hit the mailbag?
Sure.
Let's go. All right. So we're going to pull some questions that came in from support over the past week or so, I think. And so let's jump into the first one here. Okay, this person streams to Facebook a lot and they use a Starlink. They noticed that when streaming with Speedify in redundant mode with Starlink and Verizon, it shows there's no loss. But on Facebook, there were frame rate drops. Any advice on this? What should this person do?
So yeah, it depends. There can be different factors there. So yeah, the loss that we measure that we show in the user interface is on each of your connections between you and the Speedify server. So yeah, anything that happens from the server to your destination can have an effect, which a lot of times our servers are pretty close to whatever services you're using, but depending where you're located, what server you're connecting to, and how far it is to whatever server. Sometimes you could be hitting congestion or stuff on the internet, depending what path it's going on. So there's a possibility there that, yeah, after it leaves the Speedify server, that it could be running into some trouble somewhere. But then I would also check on your device itself. How does the CPU usage look and the GPU usage and things like that while you're actually streaming? Are you running into any sort of resource contention on your own machine? Would be another thing to check to make sure, is it dropping stuff before it even gets into Speedify? So yeah, those would be the two things that I would check. But yeah, if you're still seeing issues and you've checked those things and you think it should still be okay, then feel free to reach out to us at support@speedify.com. You can send us logs after you've done a stream, and we can try to look and see if something's going on.
All right. Yeah, and I think another thing with frame rate drops, that even if there isn't packet loss, that may be just that there's too much jitter or too much, the latency is kind of jumping all over. Where Facebook really expected to get a frame by now and it hasn't gotten one yet, it may just say, well, that frame's gone. I'm going to wait for the next one I'm waiting for. So yeah, even without packet loss, you may want to look at that latency graph and see, is latency, did it all of a sudden jump up to 3 seconds or something? By default, we use TCP based transports. So normally we default to a multi TCP transport, which actually sets up a bunch of TCP sockets in parallel and puts data over them. And so we'll use that in a way where we try to get away from having this really high, kind of jumpy latency. If there's any loss or anything on that link with TCP, normally you can have that latency climb. But you may be in a situation where, some of those are getting congested and you might have some jumpy latency. You might, if you're doing live streaming stuff, you may want to try UDP.
So if they're in redundant mode will default to using UDP.
That's right. There you go. Yep.
So if you're in redundant mode, it'll already be doing that. But yeah, depending on what mode you're in, if you want to just make sure you're using a particular mode, you can always go select that and try it and see if it makes a difference for you.
All right. Okay. Should we jump to the next question?
Sure.
Ooh, really all right. Okay. So they recently extended their subscription for 3 more years. Awesome. Yeah, we have a deal going on. There's the New Year's sale. So pretty good deal. You get 70% off on a 3-year pass. And so that's not a renewing thing. That's just a 3-year golden ticket for $150. I think people keep taking us up on it. So we haven't killed it yet, but at some point we're going to kill that sale and go back to our regular pricing. So if you've been holding off, I would get it because I think it's as good a deal as we've ever offered on that. So back to the question. Really need to improve the speed for their job. Using Speedify to log in and then unplugging the Speedify connection, running it without Speedify at all. How can I make Speedify work better? Yeah, I mean, if you're if you're having weird issues with speed or performance, I think the main thing would be to reach out to support right away, like this person did. So I think the good news is that this person went back and forth with our support team a little bit, and they found out that their internet service provider that they were using was sort of deprioritizing the traffic that we were using with our multi TCP. So we asked them to try switching to UDP, and everything looked great. So I think they're at a point where they don't need to disconnect anymore. If you're seeing weird things, feel free to reach out to our support team. I think our defaults are there because they work the best for most people, but you might find yourself in a situation where there's something a little bit weird about your setup, and so our support team should be able to help.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely. If you're seeing speed issues, the 2 main things that I would try are try a different Speedify server location. Try switching the location. Sometimes a different location will work better, and try changing the transport mode. Sometimes with particular internet connections or ISPs, a different transport mode will work better than the default. So those are the 2 things I would try. And if those don't work, then definitely reach out to us.
All right. Last mailbag question. Okay. This person's been using Speedify and Connectify for a while. They noticed they've been taking up a lot of GPU. CPU usage was 40%. when things were idle. So, a little bit off topic for Speedify Live, I guess, but we very recently launched Connectify Hotspot 23. And so a big improvement in that was cutting down the idle CPU usage. So this person, we actually gave them an early build of Hotspot 23 for them to try, and yeah, it worked better. idle CPUs is just way down, so I think they were happy with that. So yeah, if you normally use them together, I think Windows has things in there to share networks and set up a mobile hotspot and stuff, and it usually works when you set it up and then kind of have to go in and do it again. And so, it's I think the reliability and stuff of the mobile hotspot in Windows is pretty flaky. So if you're considering that being part of your normal setup, you might want to give Connectify Hotspot a try. And so that's at connectify.me. You can download that and give it a go if you're on Windows. And that has nice integration with Speedify too. So if you want to, bond a bunch of connections and share them back over Ethernet or share them back over Wi-Fi, Connectify Hotspot I think is the best way to do that. All right. I think that's it for Mailbag. So we can go back to audience Q&A. Yeah, if you are into Discord, we have a Discord server set up, so you can join us there if you want. I think they'll post the link in the comments here. It looks like it's everywhere in comments. So yeah, feel free to join us there and ask questions or chat with us. Let's see. So Saeed has a question. Is it possible that at one point to set up Speedify and phone and other devices connect to internet via that point, like a router device?
Yes.
Yeah. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, I mean, so what Brian was just mentioning, if you're on Windows, we have Connectify, Hotspot, and Speedify that run together. You can do that. We have the same thing on Linux devices. So sometimes people take a little Raspberry Pi or Rodroid, or there's a ton of different little Linux devices that you could use as a little router, and you can set up Speedify on there. And we have options in there, scripts and stuff for setting up the sharing that you can enable, and you can either make a Wi-Fi hotspot or share it over Ethernet. You can maybe hook that into another access point if you want. So there's options for doing that. Those are the two main platforms. You can share on Mac as well, though we've seen, depending on what version of Mac OS you're running, we've seen issues of it not working correctly. Seems to be some issues in Mac OS with that. And so, yeah, those are with the desktop platforms, you can definitely do that. With the phones, typically, if you do some sort of tethering or sharing, it's going to bypass the VPN usually, and just use your cellular or just use your Wi-Fi. If you're on Android, it does that sometimes. But yeah, it usually won't send the traffic from the tethered device through the VPN, so you can't really do that as well on the mobile devices. On Android, there are third-party tethering apps you can use that will let you go through the VPN if you're interested in that. If you get like some of the tethering apps from the store, sometimes those will work for that type of purpose. But yeah, using one of the desktop platforms, Windows, Mac, or Linux, you can do that type of stuff and have it act as a router and connect your other devices to it.
Yeah, and Smooth WAN is a project that is pretty interesting that incorporates Speedify and OpenWRT in a pretty interesting way. So if you're looking for something maybe with a little bit less work than setting everything up yourself, Smooth WAN is probably interesting to look at. And if you're comfortable with Linux, I've actually had really good luck with getting weird router boards off of AliExpress that run Ubuntu. You can get a lot of cool things that are like 8 gigabit ports and two Wi-Fi, dual band Wi-Fi on just some weird board for like $50, and those I've had really good luck. Those are really cool. So similar to the Raspberry Pi, but if you look at that and you say, well, I need more Ethernet ports, whatever. A lot of those boards work really well, and
yeah, definitely a lot more powerful than the Raspberry Pi. There's a lot of options out there. But yeah, I see new stuff almost every week about new boards coming out of all these different things. So yeah, there's a ton of options out there for stuff. So yeah, for Linux, as long as it can run, it can either be ARM or Intel x86 type CPU stuff. But as long as you can run something Debian based for Linux, Speedify should work on it.
Yep. All right, so we are at 240. Are the other boards less likely to overheat like the Pis?
Depends on the board. I would say some of them definitely, yes. Usually have. I mean, some of them in case you can get active cooling for it, or they're just better cool. Yeah, I think the Raspberry Pi, I think they improved it some from when it first launched. The Raspberry Pi 4 had overheating problems, but yeah, some of the boards might work better. Some might be worse. I don't know. We haven't tried all of them, but something you might want to look at reviews about the board and see how it
Dungeons and
performs.
Druids is asking if there's any good Risk boards out there, but I think Risk is kind of a flash in the pan. I don't think it'll be around much longer. I think it's kind of dead. It's a dead platform. I wouldn't waste your time. Let's see. Saeed asks, can we set up Speedify on Raspberry Pi? Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. We have videos and articles about doing that. But yeah, if you go to our support.speedify.com and search for Raspberry Pi, you should find there's all sort of getting started articles about that and how to set it up. Yeah, it's pretty easy to get started and set up.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're just about at the end of our time here. So any last questions, go ahead and get them in. If you haven't yet, go ahead and like us and subscribe to us or whatever the thing is for the platform that you're on. Yeah, we do a weekly Q&A, and then we have interesting chats with people that are in the live streaming space, at least once a week usually. So go ahead and follow us. William R. has one more question. There's an easy way to combine multiple cell connections with the LAN.
We're thinking about it. Yeah, it might be possible to do something like that.
So the normal, so if you have, so I guess I'm a little bit curious what on the LAN you would want to do that. A common scenario that we see with just having two devices share their cellular is to just have each one set up a hotspot and join the other one's hotspot. And then they each have two cell connections. So we do that a lot where we have a Verizon phone and an AT&T phone. And then we set up we set up the mobile hotspot on both, have them connect to each other's mobile hotspot, and then each one has Verizon and AT&T, that sort of thing. So, but yeah, having a bunch and kind of, plugging them in and having a router with multiple, LTE connections and sharing that all out over LAN. Absolutely. That's an interesting thing. And it's possible now with Linux. If you want to get some 4G dongles and stick SIMs in there, you can do that now in our regular sharing stuff and all our scripts and videos of how to use Speedify on Linux and stuff. That all just works. But yeah, making it easy to actually share multiple phones and stuff. We're interested in that. We'll be working on that. All right. Looks like Reza says thanks for supporting people in Iran. Absolutely. I think that's a kind of a important part of our mission, and we're happy to help you folks out. Okay. I think that's the end of our time. If you haven't yet, like us, subscribe. One more question in here. Mo, which transport mode is best for 2G mobile networks?
I would try UDP. I would say, with the latency and everything on that, I'd say UDP might work best. But I mean, our default multiple TCP sockets, I don't know. The speed's going to be pretty low and the latency is going to be pretty high. So yeah, I would try either the multi TCP or the UDP and see what.
I would. Yeah, I would honestly try them all because I think at this point, a 2G network that's still running, I wouldn't be surprised if they have some logic on there to really prioritize things so that people get the best web experience possible on there. So I wouldn't be surprised if UDP, they deprioritize and they rate limit you so much that's not useful. And even TCP, a normal TCP and multi TCP, we're going to be up on high ports. I wouldn't be surprised if HTTPS ends up working best for you.
That's true.
I would probably try them all because I think the answer might surprise you of well, there's all this overhead with HTTPS. How is it the fastest? And the answer would be that they might be really tuning the quality of service stuff to make the best web browsing experience for people. And so, try them all. All right. Okay. I think that's all I got. Any parting words, Kevin?
No, that's it.
All right. Back to work. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.